kind of the nuts and bolts, I guess, the foundation of kind of my approach as I've taken on this new profession. And I've been enjoying kind of the learning process of kind of growing into it. So with that being said, I guess I'll open up the floor. Anything you guys want to ask, talk about, discuss on top of that or beyond what we talked about. I'm happy to answer and respond. So if we're all up and at 'em this morning. Scott Goodell, what's up, Coach? Hey, a lot of respect.
What's up, buddy?
Man.
How you doing?
Got that thing good, man. You guys got that thing rolling. It's been good to see you, brother.
We're trying, man. We're trying. It's been fun.
Hey, that's all you can do, man. That's all you can do.
All right. Great. Yeah, Coach Jones, thanks so much for that. I don't know if we have any questions that came in from participants, but anybody that's joining that has a question for Coach Jones, there's a Q&A feature that you can use to ask questions, and then we'll prompt him with those. Will you speak to me a little bit about just like, do you find that MMA fighters that come from backgrounds other than wrestling, are there mental components that they have to kind of learn since they didn't learn them through wrestling, or do you find that they've kind of learned those lessons through the other skills that they've brought to the table when they come to compete and fight?
That's a very good question, Jake. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people see that there's a lot of wrestlers having a lot of success. I don't know if there's 7 men's at UFC weights, maybe 5 or 6 of them are former wrestlers. But from my standpoint, a lot of people think it's the double legs and the single legs. It's the heavy top pressure. It's the hand fighting. It's the technical things that a wrestler brings. And while that may be true, that pales in comparison, I think, to the level of seasoning, the level of accountability, the level of work, all the mental aspects that you build through wrestling. Those are what separate the wrestlers. The thousands of reps, the diligent, consistent work over a long period of time. Those are the things that that really separate wrestlers from the pack here. Now, as far as a non-wrestling person, I think it boils down to to time. I mean, one thing that's kind of frustrating about our sport is the guys only get to do it 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year. So you just don't get a lot of reps out of going through that whole pre-competition, making weight, the whole sequence of things. You just don't get to do a whole lot. And if you say you fight, you start fighting MMA at 18 years old, that's still maybe coming up. You get 6, 8, 10 fights a year, but still that's not a lot of reps. For me, if I'm 7, I'm being generous, 5 or 6 years old, if I'm using myself, I'm getting 90, 100 matches a year from the time I'm 8 years old, at least until high school. That number's going to drop a little bit in high school and college, but I don't know, that's thousands of competition reps that you're getting. The BJJ guys get that a lot, but just the guys that have only fought, they don't have a lot of experience dealing with all the emotions and everything that goes along with going in a cage and getting ready to punch another guy, get ready to get punched in the face too, right? Yeah, I would say it's more the other stuff that the wrestling brings than it is the technical wrestling side in my mind.
Yeah, that's cool. I never thought about that aspect of it. I mean, we do get a lot. I mean, and some people think that as wrestlers, we actually get too many matches young. I mean, if we look
absolutely.
Between how we train versus like the Russians, we're getting hundreds. You got kids that might get 150 matches in 1 year, which is probably a bit extreme.
It's getting crazy.
Yeah,
it's been getting crazy.
Yeah. Now it's a development. I just hope that, we find that nice balance. All right, we're going to pull in some questions from some of our attendees. Again, guys, anybody that's on here, we're going to use the chat box as just a general way to chat with, other individuals that are joining us. We're not going to check those for questions. If you have questions, there's a Q&A box specifically that we will use to direct those questions. All right, so from David Schuler, best advice for a high school wrestler who wants to transition to MMA. So if we got high school coaches that have high school kids that want to go MMA, what would you tell them they should be doing right now to prepare and make that transition?
I would tell them to wrestle as good and for as long as they possibly can. Completely exhaust all of your wrestling opportunities. And if it's something that you think you might want to do, I'll be the first to tell you, it's not an easy life. Trying to build an MMA career is not easy. You're going to be broke for a very long time. And you're going to take some lumps learning the game and growing up through the system. But first and foremost, everything's going to start with people. Find the right people. This sport is it's a fight sport, right? So it's kind of rooted. It doesn't have the structure, in some ways, I will say, integrity that an NCAA driven or a local sports club has. So first and foremost, I would say be very selective of who you choose to entrust with guiding you in your future. And then, kind of in that transitional period, I would spend my time, before you make that leap full time, I would spend my time maybe for conditioning or cross training, which obviously with a learning element to it. Go ahead and start getting your mitt work, your pads, your striking training in once or twice a week, not to interfere with your wrestling training, but just to kind of slowly start to build. I think what you're seeing right now is, I think guys are becoming more complete fighters at a much younger age. I think you're seeing a rush of guys in their low 20s, mid 20s that are surging in the UFC, at least, as of late. So I think what you want to do is you want to make sure with that striking training to make sure whenever you do make that jump, you're able to do it at the most competitive and highest level possible. And also, don't forget where you came from. You got a lot of wrestlers out there that have been dominant at one time or the other. They knock one guy out, and all of a sudden they fall in love with their big right hand, and then they don't wrestle anymore, and then they struggle. So that would be the biggest thing is, stick with what the other stuff you can build and it'll come, but just be who you are.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's interesting, use what brought you there. But I imagine there also has to be some flexibility as people figure out what has allowed you to be successful. I mean, they're studying your past fights. It's kind of like, I know that they say about most countries when it comes to like the world championships or the Olympics, most countries are studying the stats from the current world championship. So it's almost like they're wrestling for the last world championship. And the Russians are already thinking about what they're going to do for the next one. So how do you balance that as a coach of making sure they stay true to what has allowed them to be successful, but also continue to develop so they're not as easily scouted and caught by the competition?
Yeah, I think that's when I talked about a little bit. That's where our group really helps. We have a diversity of training partners. I think that helps significantly, but it's just a matter of where you spend your time. I mean, like I said, we have a well-rounded structure that I think is pretty holistic. So you're gonna become good at what you do. It's it's not that difficult. But what my struggle is, no one likes to wrestle. You know what I mean? I shouldn't say that. They respect and have a good passion for wrestling and learning to wrestle. Through a lot of work, they've come to really appreciate the hard work that goes along with wrestling. So you if you do it right, it kind of comes out in the wash. We spend equal time on everything, and sometimes if I gotta make a guy come to wrestling practice, I gotta do it. It's just what I gotta do.
Right. That makes sense. All right, let's grab a couple more questions here from some of the audience. What aspects of MMA training would you take backwards to wrestling training? That's an interesting one.
What aspect of MMA training would I take backwards to wrestling training?
Yeah. So I think what Kevin's trying to say is, like, are there training methodologies that are utilized very commonly in MMA that maybe the wrestling world's not used to or exposed to, that you would, if you went back to coach wrestling, you would bring those?
Yeah. There's a whole lot of methods in training that if I had the power, I would eliminate altogether. I would remove from MMA. I understand how young this sport is, that we barely have a generation of professionals that have come through this sport. So a lot of things that I see, again, coming from a very organized, structured sport background at the collegiate level, to move into something a little bit looser, some of the things that I see and hear really blow my mind. There's a lot of old, archaic practices and in trainings out there, and at the very, very highest level. I mean, I literally could throw a rock and hit a guy on the street and ask him to corner someone at the sport's highest level. You have to answer 4 questions to say you weren't convicted of a felony, and that gives you the right to go corner at a world championship level fight if you find yourself in that situation. So that, to me, that blows my mind. There's not a minimum level requirements to do this. So it's kind of scary. That's why my previous question, first and foremost, I said, be very careful of who you entrust your future and development with. But I don't know, as far as taking things back. I don't think, nothing extremely creative or beneficial is really popping into my head right now. Weight loss practices are less controlled and probably more dangerous than wrestling. I don't know. If I think of something, I'll throw it up there, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. There's a lot of things that, at least from my standpoint, again, with my background, that we're trying to refine. We recently formed a partnership with Sanford Health. Sanford Health is a $6 billion hospital, very large hospital system across the country. So that, this partnership really allows us to do some really special things, and really work to really change the sport in some of the areas that we're talking about. Providing the resources that a college environment would provide, or a professional environment would provide our guys, and really extending benefits well beyond the training room is really foreign in this sport. So I think this partnership really puts us in a category, and the results have proven it, that we're heading in the right direction. We're really doing the right things.
Awesome. Greg Jones, thank you so much. Where can we vote for your gym? So Sanford MMA we could vote for you for the top gym in the
Sanford
country, right?
MMA, WorldMMAAwards.com, I believe, right? Check my Instagram, Coach G Jones. And like I said, I appreciate doing these little things like this, Gene. I talked to you several times. You guys, I think you guys are doing a really good job. But allow me, I'm available to be a resource to anyone out there. I'm happy to answer any quick questions or provide any advice or guidance anyone might have. So.
Greg Jones, thank you very much. My coach in college was Zeke Jones. I know he was your coach also, and he always spoke the world of you. He said not only one of the most talented, but also more importantly, one of the hardest workers and best people that he knows in the wrestling world. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Greg. We'll send people your way. We're going to kick over your information over to them.